So I guess you've been warmed up, but всем привет, как дела? Все хорошо? Конечно. And that's it with Russian. I can say like a few more words. I'm basically a toddler. I'm like, я хочу мороженое, я хочу спать, мне холодно. So like, I basically am a very whiny kid when it comes to my Russian vocabulary. I don't know. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about SEO, and more specifically technical SEO. But I think before we can dive into that, I would like to give you my definition of SEO, what it is and how it works, and how it concerns us web developers. And then once we have figured out what SEO should be doing or could be doing, we want to go technical. We want to figure out, how do my web pages actually get into search engines? Now that differs from search engine to search engine, but a few very broad concepts are pretty much the same across all search engines. I can't speak for other search engines. Obviously, I don't know how they do it all, but I know how Googlebot does it. So we'll talk a bit about Googlebot as an example of a more just generic search engine. Then once we figure out how our pages are getting into search, we can also look into things that can possibly go wrong and how we can deal with them, how we identify them, how we deal with them. And then once we have a foundation to start from, I want you to take away a bunch of pointers where you can learn more and basically keep up to date as well. Right, enough blah blah. Let's start with the meat of this talk. What is SEO? Search engine optimization. Okay, cool. But what does that mean? Who here has worked with an SEO? You. What do you think does an SEO do? That's the response I thought. I'm very sorry for making you uncomfortable. You get some chocolate. There you go. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, God. Actually, I'm sorry I hurt you. You get some chocolate, too. There you go. Oh, why can't I just fucking... It worked earlier. It worked 5 minutes. It worked on my machine. Anyway, so like, it's not necessarily clear what SEOs always do, and it's a lot that they do, actually. But we oftentimes see bad examples of SEO. You know, who here has a blog or a website, a personal website, and they get these, keep your hands up if you get these emails like, hi, would you be interested in a guest posting thingamajiggy? Or would you be interested in us sharing your link with other bloggers so that you get more SEO? That's bullshit. But that's what we perceive as SEO, and that's unfortunate that we perceive that as SEO. And you might know these link farms, right? These pages that are full of links and no content. That's also a bad example of SEO. It's not good SEO, it's not SEO, and indeed, actually, because we are filtering this kind of stuff out. So what is SEO then? Well, it depends on who you ask. But my personal definition of SEO starts with content. An SEO should work with the marketing and sales people to figure out who are our customers, who should be coming to our website, and what are they looking for, what are they trying to accomplish, and how does that fit with what we want to do, right? We want to sell a product, or we want to promote an event or something like that. Then we need to figure out what we want in terms of content. What is it that people want from us that we can deliver on our website? And then they also should talk to product owners and business stakeholders and figure out, like, what's the broader strategy here? Is it what are we looking for? Are we looking for subscriptions? Are we looking for recurring readers? Are we looking for people buying products? What is it that we try to do? It's a very strategic thing. Now, cool, that's great, Martin. But what do I care as a web developer? This is marketing and sales and business stakeholders. Wait, there's a third thing. There's a third important pillar, and that's technology. I think a good SEO should also be able to understand what happens on your pages and what technology decisions are being made or have been made that led to the situation that you're in. They should be testing and monitoring your site in terms of how they are performing in search engines, and then give you solid and useful feedback and help you make the right decisions and make the right investments, right? Who here is interested in web performance? Who here is happy how their business does web performance? Who here gets priority to optimize with web performance? See, that's the problem. And I think because the SEOs work and understand the strategy and the content side of things, and they work with these other stakeholders, how nice would it be for us web developers if we are like, our website is really slow, we need to fix that, and the SEOs goes, yes. And here is the financial reason why, and here is the business reason why, and this is why we are not reaching our business goals. So they can be our allies, and we can be theirs. So I think this is fantastic because that means that we can and should work together with SEOs as well as they should work together with us. They don't have to be developers, don't worry. You can do that. I trust all of you to be fantastic web developers. However, they can help you by, monitoring, testing, and giving you feedback on things that they see. How about that? You deploy something. How nice would it be to know that you're not going to see like your search engine results dropping, like you are dropping out of the search engine and you're not getting any more people on your website, and that's a problem. This can be prevented by an SEO helping you test the thing before it goes live, and then you can fix it. Maybe even if they are in the planning session, they could have said, well, wait a minute, there is this thing that I heard and I saw. Let me find you the article or the video or the blog post that helps you work around this problem. So good SEOs support us. And we can support them. And this talk is pretty much about the technology side, like the other things, whatever. But let me just say a thing before we go into the technical side. I think that SEO on the technical side, without looking at content and strategy, is just chocolate ice cream emoji. It's kind of pointless to do that. You're polishing a turd. If you have terrible content, none of the optimizations on the technical side is gonna help you. If your strategy doesn't make sense for your business, none of the technical optimizations will help you. And let me give you an example. Let's say my toaster broke. I'm a German. I do have breakfast and like proper breakfast. And unlike a proper German, I'm probably also very much into like toasts. And that's like, we have good bread, cool. But we also like to toast stuff. Now my toaster broke, so I need a new toaster. So I go to Google and search for new toasters. Now imagine I come across this website. What is this? Well, it's about hot bread, whatever that is. And the most prominent thing on this website is this header here that says, smart, simple, beautiful, which means nothing. Cool, so I still don't know what this is. The image looks more or less like a toaster. Maybe it's a toaster, cool. I don't know, so I read the rest. It will disrupt your breakfast. I don't want my breakfast disrupted. I want it peaceful and quiet and tasty and toasted. So, no? And then it's like thermochemical food processing. And I'm like, well, what is that? Is it cooking? Is it frying? Is it toasting? And then it's like the best invention since sliced bread. It's like, haha, yeah, still, I have no idea what this is. So maybe I look at the other things that are on this website. And then I see things like our philosophy. I don't want a philosophy lesson. I want a toaster. Hot bread X10. I don't even know what the hot bread thing is. Why would I click on hot bread X10? And then I can join the move. I don't want to join a cult. I want toast. What the heck? Who thought this was reasonable content? And now look at the same website with a slight change. I need a toaster. Most prominent thing says, the fastest toaster. Yes. This is probably a good page. I'm onto something here. Never burn your toast again. Yes. Hell yes. How often did my old toaster burn my toast when I wasn't in the kitchen because it doesn't come up and then it was a mess and it made me angry and it disrupted my breakfast. The thing that I didn't want. That happened. And it gets me my toast faster, which is brilliant because I'm usually getting up a little later than I should. That's kind of convenient if that thing actually toasts the thing quicker. And try Toasty McToasterface. So Toasty McToasterface is probably the thing that does all these things. Cool. But maybe I'm very committal, So maybe I'm not ready to make the commitment to buy this specific toaster. So how do I even know which toaster is the right toaster for me? And it's going to be a good partner in my breakfasts from now on? I don't know, but conveniently, they have a how to choose a toaster section. So I can figure out how I should choose my toaster. What criteria do I look at? And conveniently, they don't only have this one, they also have other toasters, so I can compare. And once I know that I want to make a commitment, I can just buy a toaster. Similar website, probably the same technical foundation, very different content, very, very different results. This website helps me buy a new toaster. The other one, join a movement? I don't know what that is, but I don't want any of that. Germans joining movements is not a good thing, I think. Anyway, so let's talk about technology. And conveniently, we neither need a helmet, nor safety glasses, nor safety gloves. So we can just figure out how we can do things right. And to do that, we could start with figuring out how a page actually gets into a search engine. As I said, I can't speak for all search engines, but I know how Google search works. So we'll look at how Google search does it. And we use this thing called a Googlebot. And it starts with a list of URLs. We call that the crawl queue. So we have a list of URLs, and we take a URL off of that list, and then basically make an HTTP request to get the HTML. That's what we call crawling. That's the very first step of the process. And we basically start by making this HTTP request, grabbing the HTML, and then we process that. And 3 things happen in processing. The first thing is we look through the HTML to find any links with URLs, because we can put these right back into the queue so that the next free crawler can actually make the same process happen there. So that's like an optimization that we do already. Once we have done this optimization, the next thing is we look at the content. What is this page about? Is this about Toasty McToasterface, the fastest toaster? Cool. So we can put it in the index for toasters, and maybe Toasty McToasterface, and how to choose a toaster, something like that. So we put these things into the index so that someone looking for toasters can potentially find a list of URLs from our index that contain things about toasters. It's a fast index mechanism. Cool, that's very nice. But there is a thing here. Remember that I said we make an HTTP request and get the HTML? That is literally just what you would do with curl, right? So like you just grab, we don't use curl, but but basically that's what happens. We get the HTML. But in a single page application like React, Angular, Vue, whatever, we do not really have that much content to put in the index. We just load our JavaScripts. Whoops. We know that, so that's why we put the HTML into a queue as well. We put the HTML into the render queue because we have to, render your page. Now, the web is big. Google knows more, or Google Search knows more than 130 trillion pages. So obviously we can't open 130 trillion browser tabs in one go. So we have to stagger that out a little bit. And we do that by this queuing mechanism, and once we have the resources available, a service starts that's called the web rendering service. The web rendering service is basically a headless Chromium that actually opens your page and actually renders it and executes all the JavaScript in the process. Once it has done that, we get new HTML that we feed into processing. We get new HTML that we feed into processing, and then we can look for links again, and then we can also see the content that was generated by JavaScript and put that in the index. Once things are in the index, if I search for toasters, ranking happens. Ranking means we look at everything for this topic in the index and sort it. And we use so many factors to do that. There's so much stuff in there that it's really, really hard as a user to figure out why something was ranking higher than other things. But basically, we try to figure out what is the best result for this specific user or for this situation, generally for this particular query that I'm asking. Because it's a difference if I'm asking for cheapest toaster or fastest toaster or toaster comparison or buying a toaster. There's like different things, different sites might be better than others for these different queries. We have to rank them somehow. Ranking is a completely different can of worms. I'm not going to open that. So the entire rest of the talk will focus on the first 3 stages: crawling, rendering, and indexing. We're not going to talk about ranking today. So I'm not going to talk about ranking factors or any of the magic that happens in ranking. Very different topic. All right, cool. So now we have discussed this, and we know that we can do cool stuff. And we actually announced at Google I/O that Googlebot is now evergreen. What does that mean? We have recently updated Googlebot to run Chrome 74, which is the current stable Chrome. But we also made sure that we will be always up to date within a couple of weeks of a stable Chrome release. So no longer worrying like what kind of version does Googlebot run. We are continuously testing these new versions before rolling them out on small sets of URLs to make sure that our indexing infrastructure works properly. But if you want to learn more, check out the blog post I wrote on that. There's also the video from the I/O session where we go into much more detail on these things. Cool. So Googlebot is evergreen, which means we can assume that if it works in our browser, it probably also works in Googlebot. That's good news, right? So this HTML will be executed with JavaScript. We'll render its content. We can index this content. Great. But as you know, as developers, we make mistakes. And sometimes these mistakes are tiny mistakes with big consequences, right? I think there were like a few things where someone made like a typo somewhere, and then an entire financial trading company went bankrupt. These things happen, and they can happen with our websites as well, right? So you may make a small mistake, and then you have an impact that you would not want to see. If your SEOs or you are monitoring your pages using the tools that we provide, like Search Console or Mobile Friendly Test, you have a good chance of catching these. But let's just give you an example. This is me flying a glider. I learned how to do it, but here I make a tiny mistake. Tiny mistake, and boom, right? That can happen to you, and that can happen with Googlebot as well. We can't protect you from everything. Mistakes happen. In this case, you notice that I hold my arms like this. I should have held them like this. Then I would have been flying. This way, I was flying onto my face. Good job, Martin. So how do you spot these things, and how do you deal with them? Let's say you look at your server logs and discover, Googlebot, because Googlebot tells you in the user agent string that it's Googlebot. Googlebot is not actually going to some of my pages. Some of my products are not there, some of my news stories are not there, some of my images are not there, whatever. Some stuff's missing. Or you search on your site, like you search on Google and see that some bits and pieces of your site are actually not present. Well then, the first question I usually ask when that happens is, how do you do links? And I can't believe that in 2019 I have to talk about this, but here we are, people are making this mistake still, so I'll be talking about links with you. This is a link. Good link. It's a linked element, it has an href, and that href has a URL that I can go to. Cool. Now if this is a single page application, it probably intercepts the navigation, it stops the page from refreshing, and basically uses AJAX like XHR or fetch to get the data from the backend. That's cool, that's fine, because still this has a URL that I can go to, all cool. This is not so good. Googlebot and other crawlers don't click on your stuff. We look for a URL, this doesn't have a URL, and then you might be like, oh, I'm smart, I'm going to play you, I give you a URL to go to. No, that doesn't really go anywhere, not good. Oh, but this is a URL, right? Yes, but no, right? This still does not take us anywhere, so this is still not very good. And why? Look, the rule of thumb is, if it takes your user to different content, it's a link. If it does something else on click, cool, then it's a button. Good, well spotted. But if it takes me somewhere else, again, Googlebot and other crawlers don't click on your stuff. So no, not a good link. And then, like, no. Очень плохо. Don't do these things. Не работает. Just use the first two, you'll be fine. The others, okay? That's the point that I want you to take away. But I can't believe that I have to talk about this. But all right, so now you have it. Google says, don't do that. It's just so, okay, anyway. Also, when I say these links go to URLs, look at your URLs quite carefully. So here we have two examples. One has a host and a path, cool. And then the other one has a host, a path, and a section, a fragment identifier. If you have a very long page, let's say the Wikipedia article about jam. I don't even know if that exists or if it's long for that matter, but let's say like you have a very long article about jam, the history of jam, very popular flavors, different companies manufacturing it, the jam wars of 2015, I don't know, something like that. And you can use fragments to identify which section you're interested in, but crawlers don't care. Because if I search for history of jam, I want to go to this page. I want to go to the same page if I search for popular jam flavors. So we ignore these things. And that has been fine until single-page applications were initially introduced. Because the only way for us to know that the content needs to change without anything triggering a navigation and us getting a JavaScript event was actually the hash change event. So what we did is, we had links to different hashes, and these would then basically just cause an event that we can listen to, and then we can change the content using Ajax. Cool, great. But that's a hack. Originally, this was never intended to work that way, so we kind of like exploited an implementation detail rather than the standard. And since then, we have the history API. The history API gives us a possibility to have clean URLs that just work. And when I say just work, they just work. Down to Internet Explorer 11. If you are using Opera Mini on a very low-end device, or if you're on a, I mean, what kind of computer runs IE10 or IE8? They're not going to be very fast. So I guess a page refresh that refreshes the page is better than waiting for this very slow computer to execute the JavaScript to make the change. I just want the content. And this just works fine. Just use History API. Most frameworks do that by default. Others let you switch to it. Do switch to it. Do not use or rely on fragment URLs. And then you might use something like Search Console. And you might look into your coverage report, which tells you which pages are in search, in Google Search Index. And you might be like, yeah, it was crawled. That's cool. It was discovered. So the links and the fragment URLs are not my problem. It was discovered, but it's not indexed at this point. What does that mean? It means that you're in the crawl queue. We haven't crawled this page yet. That might persist for a while. It might really be quickly gone, but it might persist for a while. Why is that? It's because of crawl budget. Well, what is crawl budget, Martin? Well, crawl budget consists of two things. First is the crawl rate. How quickly can we crawl your pages? The second is how often should we crawl your pages and recrawl your pages. That's called crawl demand. Now let's look at crawl rate for a second. Crawl rate is the symptom of the issue or the challenge that we have to master. That is, we want to crawl your pages as quickly as possible without hurting your users or your servers, right? So just imagine you have 1 million products and we discover 1 million URLs. And we're like, yes, this is cool. Well, let's like grab them all. And that might actually be fine. But what if your web server is a Raspberry Pi under someone's desk? You shouldn't do that necessarily, but we would probably bring down your web server. So what we do instead is we crawl with a certain amount and look at things like the response time and the response code. Here your server says everything's good, 299 milliseconds, fast response. And we are going with like 300 requests per second. So maybe we can up it a little bit. The server gets slower. Maybe this is not a good idea. We might actually step back. But let's say we would gamble and have like tried out an even higher amount of crawling. And your server goes, no, screw this. Like, what the hell? Then we're like, oh, we are sorry. We'll like crawl a little less. Don't worry about it. Sorry for that. Whoopsies. So we look at a bunch of things and try to like figure out how much we can crawl. You can also use Search Console to tell us not to crawl too much. You can say like, oh, there's Black Friday sales. Everyone is on our website. Please only crawl 100 pages a second or something like that. And then you can tell us not to go over this. That works as well. But this has nothing to do with the quality of your website. Don't worry about it. A low crawl budget does not hurt your ranking, does not hurt your indexing. It just means that we are not going to update content as quickly in our index. But that's all. So it doesn't necessarily matter. Also, crawl demand. We look at things like, is this page actually popular? Is this like an intranet login page? Or is this actually like something that lots of people are linking to? Organically, if you buy links, that doesn't count. Sorry. So we look at organic links, we look at things like how often does this show up in search, how well does it rank usually, and then we figure out, so this is actually a pretty good page, we should probably come back. But is that always true? Well, no. A Wikipedia article might not change that often. It might change every couple of days or maybe even every couple of weeks. So we also look how fresh is this page, right? When was this last updated? How often does this usually update? We keep track of that. Like, oh, this page wasn't updated in 5 years, but now it updated. And then it updated again a week later. Maybe we should, like, every couple of weeks, we should check. And then if that doesn't happen again, then we, like, back off a little bit. Again, this has nothing to do or nothing to say about quality or if your page is ranking well, it doesn't matter. What matters here really, truly, is that we are trying to not kill your page and we're trying to make the right decisions in how often we recrawl your stuff. A news page with content that changes every couple of weeks, we might crawl a little more often than a page about the history of jam. The history of jam is not that exciting, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. Change my mind. And also, what's important to understand with crawl budget is it's not just the pages that we crawl, it's also the resources attached to them. So if you have a page with 10 images and a style sheet, we fetch your page, we fetch the style sheet, and we fetch the 10 images, right? The same goes for AJAX requests. An AJAX request counts towards your crawl budget because still we are calling a server somewhere. So, However, we do caching for GET requests. So let's say you have 2 pages, the same CSS, but different images. 1 image each. We go to the first page, we crawl or fetch the style sheet, we fetch the image. We go to the second page, We use the cache for the style sheet because we've got it already and it hasn't been expired since. And then we do the other image. So the counting of resources is important, but we can only cache GET requests if you make POST requests from your APIs, and with XHR, we're not going to cache those. We're also going to crawl content that you might not want in search, and we might also crawl things that are actually duplicated content or the same page reachable via multiple URLs. I'll talk about that in a second. Another thing to keep in mind are URL parameters. If you're using URL parameters instead of paths, that's perfectly fine. But if you have URL parameters that show up in links that do not change the content of the website, you want to tell us that, and I'll explain to you in a second why. Also, soft errors. If you have an error condition, you should tell us that in the HTTP status code, because we are considering that. All right, if you want to learn more about crawl budget in general or how to optimize it, we have a fantastic blog post and another blog post linked from that where you can learn more. But let's talk about duplicated content for a second. Sorry, did you want to take a picture of this? Because I saw some phones going up. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, gone. So let's say you have a dog rating website. You have pictures of dogs and people can like rank them or rate them or comment on them or something. You have a top dog of the day or of the week, and then you have the individual dog pages. Today, Leica is the top dog. So /top-dog actually shows the Leica's page, but also /dog/Leica shows the page on any day. What could you do to help us? Well, what you could do is, we are crawling both pages and we're throwing one away. So you could tell us, you know what, this is actually the same as this other page. And then if we crawl the top dog first and we see like the canonical is this, then we're like, all right, okay, we don't crawl the other one because we know that it's the same thing, so cool, thank you very much. You might save a request, that's pretty nice. If you have lots of pages, that might be specifically nice. So you can tell us what you think is the canonical, is the URL that we should be using for this content, but we might not always use it. So thanks for the hint. But sometimes we figure out that that's not exactly what we need or what we want, and then we pick a different canonical. That's not a problem unless we pick a completely wrong canonical. Then you can totally tell us using the public support channels that we've got. But normally it's things like the German website of a retailer and the Swiss website of a retailer, both written in German, have the same content, but one is at .ch, one is at .de, and then sometimes the businesses tell us like the ch is the canonical and the de is the canonical, but they are the same content, so we're like, they are the same thing, we just have different entry points here. So for people searching in Switzerland, we might still show the ch domain, but we will say the canonical is the German, for instance, because the market is larger and there's probably more links and signals we get from that. So don't worry about that, but it's good to give us this hint. Also, if you have content that you don't want to end up in search, let's say like I have a really stupid high school photo on my website under /private/Martin Splitt high school photo.jpg, I don't want that to be crawled. So I can use a robots.txt file on my server to tell us not to crawl this. And that's great. I can say like, do not put this, do not crawl this. But if someone else links to it and we index and crawl this page, then we see like Martin Splitt's, a link, Martin Splitt's high school photo to this particular URL, and then we're like, okay, we put that into the crawl queue, and then before we crawl it, we're like, oh, we can't crawl this. But we have the information that this is Martin Splitt's high school photo, so we might still put it in the index, because it might still be useful, but we give you a way to not have that happen to you. You can use an HTTP status code header, sorry, not status code, an HTTP header, the xrobots tag header to tell us not index this. And you can also put it in an HTML page. You can tell us not index this page. The HTML tag and the HTTP header is a pretty tricky one. If you're roboting this, then we're never going to see them. So you want to be careful with your robots. Just generally be careful with your robots. Some people think that they can use it to optimize their crawl budget, and then they get too excited. So this page should have cats, but if you look at this, there are no cats here. It's just an empty blank page. What happened? Well, if I check it out, I see that it makes an API request because it's a client-side rendered app. It makes this API request, and it doesn't find, it finds the robots.txt, and the robots.txt goes, no API requests for you, good sir. So we can't actually fetch the data from the API. Be careful with your robots.txt. This tool, by the way, is called the mobile-friendly test. It's fantastic. It doesn't only tell you if your page is mobile-friendly. It also gives you page loading information, and it gives you JavaScript errors. So that's kind of cool. Now let's talk about URL parameters. So this is a specific cat URL, and we can like crawl that. That's perfectly fine, not a problem. But what about those two? Same cat, but there's like something that adds a timestamp, and then there's something that adds a session identifier that might be like someone posted this from their own while they were logged in on the site or something, and now we find this URL and we're going to crawl it. What you can do to help us not crawl this unnecessarily is you can tell us that this is just the same thing, and you redirect to the page without this URL parameter. And then eventually we'll figure out, oh, this URL parameter doesn't matter, and you'll be fine. Now let's talk about soft errors. Soft errors are a tricky one. They can happen with a bunch of different things. And they can also lead to what we call infinite crawl spaces. So I go to a URL that doesn't exist, but it's a single page application. So the server just serves the index HTML and the JavaScript and goes like, yeah, whatever, here you go. And then I see an error message. This is fine, right? Well, no, because the server said, this page is fine. Sure. Bye-bye. And that doesn't make us happy, right? Googlebot is not exactly excited about this. So, yeah. And now imagine you have like a page that has a bug in the pagination. You have a link to the next page, and that just increases the counter, and it goes infinitely wide. But your server goes, yeah, this is okay, and then shows an empty page. So we would start with like page 1, good. See the link to page 2, good. See the link to page 3, good. And now we don't have any more cats, but we see the link to page 4, and your server says good. We see the link to page 5, your server says good. Not good. That's not a good idea. But how do you solve this in a single page application? Are you screwed now? No, you're not. The first choice actually it leads to like stuff like this as well. We have error detection for this. We try to like catch this before it happens, but sometimes it does get through. Sometimes we don't catch it, and then this ends up happening. The one way to fix that is by redirecting us. If you know from your URL, so this tries to fetch the dog doesn't exist, okay, that is fine, not a problem. We'll just like redirect to a page that we know the server responds with a 404 at. So /not found will give us a 404, and we're like, okay, so this is a redirect of this other page, so we are crawling this less. Or if we figure out after a couple of years and all the links disappear to this, then we'll stop actually crawling this. You can also use a meta robots tag. So here we have a meta robots tag somewhere, and it says all, just like go ahead, have fun. And once we figure out that this page does not exist, we change it to say do not index this. And now you might wonder, that's an interesting way of doing it. Can't I just do it differently, like have it no indexed from the beginning, and then set it to index once I know that this exists? That might be a nice solution, right? It's not. Why is it not? It's because of our pipeline. Remember, we take the URL, we get the HTML that now has a no index in it. Processing goes, oh, this is no index. So I can just move on with the next URL because this doesn't want to be in the index. So that means our JavaScript never ran, so it never had the chance to remove the no index. So I have removed all pages from the index now. Good job. Other things that can go wrong is when you do things like this. Let's say you have a homepage with a GDPR warning and a cookie policy and privacy policy and whatnot. And you're basically having the user click agree, and then you set a cookie that the user agreed. And then when the user goes to this news story on your website or this blog post, then you check if this agreement has happened, and if not, you just redirect to the homepage and have them like agree and set the cookie, and then they can click again. The problem with this is that Googlebot will get stopped here because it's going to be in this like redirect, and we're going to be like, oh, so this page actually doesn't exist, or it does not exist anymore, and it's now just this main page. That's weird. Yeah, and that's because Googlebot does not have any state besides the cache. So we're not using cookies. Well, you can write to cookies, but we're going to erase them before the next crawler happens. So no cookies, no local storage, no session storage, no IndexedDB. You have all these interfaces, but you cannot use them across page loads, right? So if you write something into IndexedDB in the beginning of the load of your JavaScript and then read from it, that'll work. But it'll not work if you like go to the next URL and then the crawler picks it up and then runs it, because the cookies and everything else will have been cleared in between. And it makes sense. This is not a bug. If you think about it, imagine a user searches for something and finds the news story as a search result, clicks on it, but lands on your homepage, says yes to the cookie, and then it's like, where's this article now? So instead, what you should be doing is you can have this cookie pop up on every page where the cookie hasn't been set yet. We'll be fine dealing with the cookie pop up, but if you do it right. But the user has a better experience because they're going to come to your page, see the cookie pop up, go like, yes, of course, and then they can actually read the article without having to navigate through your home page. Also, you want to use feature detection because even though a bunch of features are present, doesn't mean that they always like work or work properly or are actually present. You know, just because I have a nail doesn't mean I also have a hammer to put it into the wall. I need to make sure that I do have the hammer in the other hand before I use it. Cool, but that sometimes can go slightly wrong. So I'll show you an example. So we check if this browser supports geolocation. It does, that's fantastic. So then we load content local to me. So if this is, again, a news site, it might load news stories from Russia now, and back in Switzerland, it will load Swiss news stories. If my browser doesn't support geolocation, that is fine. We just load like the global news. Cool. However, this API causes a permission pop-up that I can decline, and sometimes on one of my older phones, the GPS stopped working, so it never actually got a GPS location, and it timed out. I would not get any content here. Because my browser says, yes, this geolocation is supported, but then error conditions happen and I actually don't get the content. Googlebot will decline these permission requests. What sense does it make to give you, let's say, like the microphone access or webcam access in Googlebot? What, do you want to see our data center? Like, that's not going to happen. So instead, what you should be doing is you should always look out for the error conditions and handle them properly. In this case, if the geolocation exists but fails, we also load the fallback content. Much, much better. Everyone gets content all the time. If you want to learn more about the specifics of Googlebot where features are having limited support or are not supported, we have put together a guide that walks you through the steps of figuring out what's happening, so you can try that to fix your problems more easily. Also, you want to make sure that users are seeing your page in the best possible light, right? So if I'm looking for an apple pie recipe, and all I get is Barbara's baking blog 20 times. I'm like, but which one is the recipe? We also have these like snippet descriptions. These are called meta descriptions or snippets, as we call them sometimes. And you can give them per page. And then I know, okay, so cupcakes, I don't care. Brownies, I don't care. Apple pie, that's the thing. That's the one that I care about. You don't have to write these. That's what your content writers, copywriters, and sometimes also SEOs do. They are good at optimizing these, but you need to make sure that you have a sound technical foundation to provide them. And the way to do that in React, for instance, is React Helmet. You install that additional package, and then you can use your properties from the component from the page to actually populate the title and meta descriptions and other meta tags. So in this case, we give it like a helpful title and a helpful description. Let's say like, Barbara's apple pie recipe. This is the apple pie recipe my grandma used, and it's really easy to make and quick and fantastic, and everyone loves it. Great, I want to click on that result. I'm hungry, you might notice. In Angular, you have the built-in title and meta services. They do the same thing as in React. You just give it the properties that you need to create this title and meta snippet. And in Vue, you use the Vue meta package to do the same thing. That's cool. And if you want to learn more about these things, we have a video series called the JavaScript Seo Series on our YouTube channel that goes over these and other things as well. We talk about testing and essential tips and the different frameworks and all that kind of stuff. We also talk about a concept that I'm going to discuss later. Cool. Now we talked a lot about JavaScript and how Google search renders it, but the reality is that not every crawler does this. There's other search engines, and then there's like social media networks and other applications that crawl your page when you share a link, but they don't run JavaScript on your page. So how do you deal with that? Well, maybe consider something like server-side rendering. Server-side rendering isn't really a workaround. It's something that is fantastically fast usually because it generates the HTML and the browser can parse the HTML as it arrives. With client-side rendering, it has to get the HTML and then it has to download the JavaScript, parse it and execute it, and then generates more HTML. That's going to take longer. That's just the reality. If you don't want to do that and like lose all your JavaScript features, there's a thing called hydration. Most frameworks offer it in one way or another, which means your JavaScript becomes optional. So you get the HTML real quick, and then once the JavaScript is executed, it actually upgrades into the regular single-page app and client-side app. If you don't want to do that, because doing that on every request is quite a bit of cost that you incur, you might want to do pre-rendering. That makes sense if you have a page like a blog or a marketing page where you know when the content changes. On my blog, the content only changes if I write a new blog post or edit an existing one. So I know precisely when I need to re-render it, and then you can use something like a headless browser, for instance. You can use Puppeteer or any service that does that for you, or you actually rewrite your application slightly into universal JavaScript and execute the JavaScript on the server side. That works just as fine. If you don't want to make changes to your front end, you can also use a workaround called dynamic rendering. It's in the video series as well, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But let's look at how server-side rendering would work in React. So here, I'm using Next.js, which is a higher level framework that uses React components, but it basically pre-renders it server-side renders it for me on the fly. So that's kind of nice. It works with things like Now and Zeit and all that kind of cool stuff. And it's really fun to work with this, and it's actually quite successful. There was another talk at the same time about Next.js, so sorry to keep you here, but definitely check out the videos once they are uploaded. If you want to do React pre-rendering, there's a thing called React Snap that uses a headless Chrome to crawl my different pages and generate the HTML for me that I can then deploy on any static hosting. That's kind of nice as well. And React Snap also has the option to do hydration. You would have to change your app component a little bit to either hydrate or render the application, depending on if you're on the server or in the browser. Dynamic rendering, on the other hand, is this workaround where your server looks at the user agents, and if they are looking like a crawler, then you would pass that into either like a rendering service that you can become a customer of, I guess, or you use your own Rendertron instance, or you use like Puppeteer to build your own thing, or Phantom.js, whatever works for you. And you would generate static HTML and send that to the crawlers. But for your users, because you want to make sure that everything works the way that you developed it and is like basically untouched, for user browsers, you just give them the regular thing, like the regular client-side rendered application. We consider that a workaround because it is a bit of effort and it is a bit of maintenance that you have to deal with. It has a bunch of complications around caching and all that, but it gets you started. It gets you working with crawlers that don't run JavaScript and also can help you with problems you have with your JavaScript and Googlebot real quick. But it's a workaround because it doesn't give your users any benefits. Server-side rendering or pre-rendering are a longer-term solution. A higher investment, yes, but a longer-term solution that helps you also deliver your content faster to users, which makes your users happier and more engaged. If you want to learn more about dynamic rendering, we wrote a blog post and a code lab and a documentation page on that. So if you want to try that out, give this link a go. Now, that's all nice and fine, but I think it's time for us to wrap up and enjoy the coffee break or the Q&A session. So wrapping up, I think you should use tools like the mobile-friendly test or Search Console to test how your pages are doing in search. These are our tools, so they give you the actual data. They're not like making stuff up, don't worry about that. And they are free, and they are fantastic. Search Console even emails you if there's a problem. So if we find an issue, we let you know. If you are registered, if we know that you are owner of this domain, we'll let you know. Server-side rendering and pre-rendering, as I said, are fantastic investments for longer term. You definitely should look into it if you're not using that yet. Again, I recommend Natalia's talk on Next.js. It's probably really, really good resource as well. If you're using Angular, you want to look into Angular Universal. And if you're using Vue.js, then you might check out Nuxt.js as well. Generally speaking, if you help crawlers understand your pages, you'll have a good time. In most cases, it'll just work. If you write semantic HTML, like proper links and stuff, you can add structured data to tell us more about what something really is, and basically just help us with robots.txt and meta tags to figure out what this page is about, and then you'll have a pretty fine time. You're pretty much safe. If you want to learn more, we wrote a bunch of guides to help you out. There's also a starter guide on this page for developers with like a developer's guide to search or something like that. It's fantastic. My coworker Lizzie wrote most of it. It's really, really good. You can also watch videos if you prefer videos. The JavaScript SEO videos are online on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Google Webmasters. You also can ask us questions. Every couple of weeks, we run office hours, online office hours, so you can jump on a Hangouts with us and ask us questions, and we're happy to answer them. Those Hangouts tend to be pretty generic, so it's not just technical SEO, it's also regular SEO, but you might learn a thing or two, so that's kind of cool. And you might figure out like who's hanging out there. Is there someone who like has the questions that I have myself and now got an answer, so maybe they can help us. But if you have JavaScript-specific questions, we have a mailing list that you can join and ask your JavaScript questions there, and that's like just focused around JavaScript sites. You also can stay up to date with us on our blog. So we have the Webmasters blog that we keep posted and we post announcements to, or you just follow us on Twitter. So, with all that being said, that's all, folks. Spasiba большое, and have a good day.
Спасибо, Martin. Like to join me for the conversation, maybe in Russian? You don't want to join me for a conversation? Well, it's not like you have a choice. You know, that was very insightful. Thank you so much for all the tips and all. Especially, I really didn't know that Googlebot doesn't click and doesn't process data. That's actually something that's quite useful to know. So I think at this point, though, it would be useful to know, is every content or every piece of content equally viable or important to Google when you index it? For example, if there are some things that are generated via JavaScript, and there is something that's already static and lives in HTML. I think there was an article, maybe even in the video series I mentioned once, that might take more time for the content generated with JavaScript to be indexed. So if you have like a breaking news story that you want to show up in search results immediately, that it's probably better to use server-side rendering. Is that true still?
Yeah, that is true. So we're working on fixing that crawl delay issue, but it's still a thing that we have to, as I said in the process, right? We parse the HTML, and if we have content there already, we put it in the index. So you land in the index quicker. It doesn't
so with dynamic rendering, we solve that?
Dynamic rendering would solve that because we have the content then in the initial HTML. It doesn't mean that we are treating it as less important or anything. Like, it doesn't say anything about the quality or how we are treating it in the index. It just means it takes longer for it to get into the index.
All right. How much delay are we talking about here? Like seconds, minutes, hours?
It can be minutes, it can be seconds, it can be hours, it can theoretically be days. But the problem is, so like a few people are saying, it's weeks and months. And the problem there is that you don't see where the delay comes from. It can be crawling delay, because as I said, we have crawl budget and we have crawl demand. So if it's a page that only gets crawled once a month, and you just missed the crawl, and then update something with Java, like some of the content that just gets generated with JavaScript, people are like, it took a month for this content to show up. And we're like, yeah, it would have taken a month for HTML content to show up because we just missed the crawl window.
Okay, that's interesting. We also have a couple of questions here coming in. Like one of them that's been quite popular. Can you name a few things that really have a dramatic influence on the search engine, on the search ranking, like security, HTTPS?
Yeah.
Performance, probably.
So the things that are really, really important are, content. Your content should be good. That's like the very first thing that needs to be good. I know that's not something that I know. If you look at technical signals, if your site got hacked, if you are using Search Console, we'll let you know that your site got hacked and that it got removed. Also, if you do some things like if you have like a virus infection, or if there's like a Bitcoin miner on your page, we're going to not show that in search results.
Oh, you can't do that anymore?
You can't do that anymore. I'm very sorry. You can't use our infrastructure to mine Bitcoins.
Yet.
Anymore, yet. Who knows? But basically, yeah, so security issues are a big thing. HTTPS is more a tiebreaker. So if we have like 2 pages, and one is HTTPS, the other one isn't, we might switch them. But it's not, HTTPS is important for your users and is a trust signal, but it's not one of the most important ranking factors. Mobile friendliness is pretty important as well, because most people are coming from mobile now. But yeah, so like I would say security issues are a big thing. Web performance is a big thing, because in the end you want your users to be engaged and have the content quick. And definitely, I know we can't influence it directly usually as developers, but if you see stupid content like the hot bread X10 thing, then talk to your SEOs and talk to your marketing departments. Because sometimes the SEOs have the same problem as we have as developers. So they are like, we need to change this content. And everyone's like, no, I don't think so. I think this is fine. But if the developer also comes and goes like, what is this? Then, it's more people pressuring to fix the content. And that's an important thing.
Okay. We have also a question from Dennis and Dmitry. Are you looking inside shadow root when page index happens? What about web components?
So with the new Evergreen Googlebot, we have Shadow DOM support, native Shadow DOM support. And I think, if I remember correctly, that's fine. Like Shadow DOM content will be indexed by Googlebot. But again, remember, there's crawlers that don't run JavaScript and might not see your Shadow DOM content. And also, for composability, it's a good idea to put like critical content into the light DOM so that you can override it and modify it by wrapping it into more components and stuff. So I would say, I would still stand by my previous statement a couple of months back that you should put it into the light DOM and use the shadow DOM to encapsulate implementation details rather than content.
It's also interesting to see a lot of things like static site generators becoming a real thing where you will pre-render and just put on the server as much as you can, just so you have a nice skeleton. Yeah, it's interesting. That's exactly what I wanted to kind of mention. It feels like we are kind of moving full circle at this point. Does the existence, let's say, of CDNs, if you put the content to the CDNs, does it also help, or is it just?
It does help because things are faster usually, right? If they are closer to the user, which is what CDNs are mostly about, then that's a fantastic way of getting it faster.
Okay. All right, so I think I'm running out of questions here, but I'm actually very happy to see that we actually moved away from Chrome 41. What was the reason actually why we got stuck with it? Is it like technical? Or is there, because it wasn't supporting grid layout,
yes.
It wasn't supporting many features.
Yes, so the reason for that was that...
Maybe you should also explain that we got stuck with it for a while.
So the situation before I/O was that we were running Chrome 41 in the rendering service, so we have updated so in Chrome 74, don't worry, but you will hear SEOs or people sometimes, even developers, oftentimes go like, what? It's like now, today, I hear web developers going like, oh, what? I just found out Google is running Chrome 41 for rendering. And I'm like, yes, but no. Has changed since I/O, good job. So you'll hear that a few times, like, oh, but it's using Chrome 41. And you can say, actually, no, there's a blog post from Google saying that that's not true anymore. And the reason for that was that we had Chrome 41 back in the days did not have any APIs to let instrumentation happen. So we couldn't like pull into it. So we had to write a lot of custom code to get data out of the render that we did. Then the team said, okay, we can update it to, let's say, like Chrome 50 something. But then we run into the exact same problem because it takes us like half a year or I don't know how long to port the code from one Chrome release to the next. And then like Chrome keeps running ahead of us. So we need to like figure something out. And then they decided to work together with another team, and that's the team that brought us Puppeteer and the DevTools API, basically. So the DevTools integration is something that our rendering team helped with, and that was the strategy was to bring that up on the road to actually be able to use that rather than the custom code. So once it landed in Chrome, and I think that was like a year ago or something like that, DevTools API landed in Chrome, that was the moment when they could start actually building or rebuilding the code that they use to use these APIs to extract data. And then they still have some special APIs on top of it, but most of it is now like in the public source code, so it's easier for us to update. But that just took like a couple of time.
Okay. There's just one more question that came from Alex. So when it comes to single-page applications, React, Vue, and so on, what are the common things that we need to look out for? Like the common mistakes that people do all the time?
So the common mistakes, because I still need to talk to the framework teams on about the documentation. The documentation neglects the meta description and the title tags. It's just like, yo, you have this HTML, and now we forget about it, and now we do all this cool stuff here, and no one ever talks about the fact that now all your pages have the same title and meta description, which is not fantastic. So that's like a really low-hanging fruit that you want to fix first. Okay. And then it's like performance optimization and making sure that your render actually works properly. So you want to test this, and then you see like where the problems are. It depends a lot.
Okay. I spent quite a bit of time on search engine optimization these days. All the resources and tools and techniques and everything. It's like, it wasn't a compliment.
Wasn't fun.
I'm just.
No, I mean we're trying to get as much documentation into developers' hands as possible.
Yeah, that's very cool. Actually, I think like it's I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like over the last year or two, there's been a lot of push towards evangelizing and explaining the purpose and how it works and all. So keep doing that.
Yes, thank you. We'll do that.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks
Thank
for being
you,
with us
Vitaly.
today. Oh, well.